India's female contribution to the workforce is abysmal as per a World Bank report, which has ranked the country as 120th among 131 nations. The statistics paint a blurry picture, with India having a second lowest female labour force participation rate in South Asia and the worst among all BRICS economies. It is argued that one of the reasons for this has been a perception of safety and security for women. On this too, the statistics are disturbing. According to the National Crime Records Bureau, 2016 saw the lowest conviction rate of 18.9% for crimes against women in a decade. With high-profile incidents of safety and security of women dominating the landscape, from public transportation to workplace sexual harassment and even incidents of murder in the workplace, it is evident that there is a lot more effort which needs to go forward in ensuring a fearless work environment for women. In this special episode of India Risk Report, we salute the spirit of India's women and gain insights on the safety and security of Indian women in the economic sphere.
Hello and welcome to another episode of India Risk Report. And in this episode, to mark the International Women's Day, we are looking specifically on the issues related with safety and security for women in India's workplace. India has a very large working population, but within which the figures of women in the workplace are still not up to levels of international standards. And because the one factor, as people may argue, that still deters women from coming out and exploring opportunities at the workplace is the issue of safety and security. And we have two experts who are hands-on players in this subject. We have the very distinguished Ms. Aishwariya Bhati, who is at the Supreme Court, the Honorable Supreme Court of India, was most recently in the news for one other reason. We are looking forward to your legal perspective, and we have with us Rashmi Dastidar, who has worked in various corporate organizations but now is with the MMTC-PAMP arrangements in India. And let me start with you, Rashmi. The point that I think we need to really first clear our mind on, that why is it that after so many years, and the subject of women's safety has been in the news for some time, people are becoming increasingly conscious about it. But do you feel the corporate sector is actually doing enough?
Well, I would say, usually it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. A lot needs to be done, but we should definitely recognize the fact that corporates are waking up to the fact that the only way they can hire women and retain them is by having policies in place, by letting women discuss in focus groups how would you feel safe in your workspace. It's no longer about we just telling women that this is what we have done, you need to change behaviors, men need to change behaviors. We've moved away from that conversation. Our conversation is about how do you have change that is led by women, and how do you make them feel safe? What does safe constitute? And this is something that every woman coming into a workspace needs to answer.
Okay, so fine, that I think there isn't enough conversation that's happening, but equally important, there is a two-sided view about the legal perspective on this. One is that in some areas, the law has been strengthened considerably to give women the benefit of doubt, to give women the chance to use the legal framework to allow the detractors to women feel a bit nervous about how the law would come down. And I want your perspective on that. And equally important is having the laws is a good thing, but enforcing that is a bigger challenge.
You've hit the nail on the head. I think, laws-wise, India is one country that would fare very, very high. The kind of laws that we have to deal with women-specific offenses, women-specific issues, sexual harassment at workplace. You'd be surprised to know that our entire criminal jurisprudence goes on one tangent, where a crime has to be proved beyond the shadow of all reasonable doubt. But when it comes to dowry deaths, the onus shifts on the accused, on the matrimonial family and the husband if the marriage happens within 7 years inside the matrimonial home. So the laws are amazing. You know, sexual harassment also 2013. Of course, it came very late in the day. 1996 was the Vishaka judgment where there was no law and the Supreme Court said that sexual harassment at women is a serious issue and it needs to be, the guidelines need to be there. The law, of course, came much later. But the real problem is really enforcement, implementation. I think, I mean, we have too much baggage, and I think, you know, culturally we have too much baggage. There are issues which are short-term, issues which are long-term. I think on long-term issues, the solutions have to begin from home. It can't go anywhere else. It's the same home, the same society, the same nation. The change really is happening because women are not accepting it anymore. Because women are standing up and saying that if, you know, they need to be in workspaces, then their safety and security has to be taken care of. There has to be zero tolerance on offenses against women. And eve teasing or voyeurism or stalking is not minor or innocuous anymore. You know, earlier, before Nirbhaya incident, there was just one offense against women. One was rape, of course, a heinous one, but other was outraging modesty of a woman. We saw a slew of changes, and the laws have actually taken up the whole spectrum. The enforcement is still way behind.
Okay. Well, you know, I'd pick up one word from her very comprehensive answer, and that is baggage. You know, our society carries a lot of baggage, and the baggage can be seen at workplaces and in the behavior of people right across the board, in social, economic, political forums, in day-to-day life, in offices. So what kind of a model would you suggest that we can seriously consider incorporating, where we are actually moving forward, but we are not running so fast that we keep falling flat on our faces?
Right. One is behaviors. Yes, you know, we are always told we can't exhibit this behavior at workplace. Women need to be negotiators. Let's give you some training around that. Men need to exhibit this. I think the conversation has to move away from behaviors. We have to understand that there are inherent biases in our system. And how do we tackle biases? By having systems in place, by having processes in place. One process that applies to everyone. Somebody is harassed, a complaint comes up in a corporate space, it is addressed by process. It can be against the highest office in a company. But the complainant has to feel safe to come up with that complainant to that internal committee and bring up a case. So I'm saying, yes, there are behaviors which are which we can't accept, but we have to move away from that because we understand our society operates with these behaviors. We come from a patriarchal society, all of us. We're ingrained in that. We know that. That's a given. The only way we can deal with that is when we have business systems in place, processes, hiring. When you look at hiring and retaining people from a process point of view, blind resumes. I come, give you my resume, you don't know if I'm a man or woman. You look at it just for the merit of the CV. That is how you look at something like this, is my point of view.
No, but I just take it forward. Sure. It may be a blind resume, but once you join the workplace,
right.
I mean, what are the essentials that you expect?
I mean, I'll tell you, when I started this conversation with my current employer, they said they're going into a new office space. I asked them, do you have a creche? And they said, well, not yet. And I said, well, the criteria is ask women around in the office, would they want a creche? I want a creche. And they said, fine, if that's what you'd like to hire you, we'll do that. So creche became a part of the blueprint. We are moving into a new office space, which is going to have a creche.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, that's a very good example. But, you know, there's another point, and briefly put, all big cities in the world have certain things in common. You know, people today in Mumbai and Delhi and Bangalore are relating more with the kind of work culture that is in London and New York and elsewhere. But at the same time, even in those cities, coming into a fancy office, a glass house is one thing, but you have to negotiate your way through the rest of the day's confusion and traffic is another thing. And here comes in the aspect that while the office may turn around hand on heart and say we're doing the best we can, but is India doing the best it can?
Certainly not. We have a very, very long journey to go ahead. and the public spaces in fact, it's more so in cities. I think villages, maybe because people are more proximate with each other, they know each other better, so there is less chance of those seemingly, security-related, safety-related offenses against women. But in bigger cities, anonymity gives a big handle to people to get away with things, and so our public spaces in big cities is a huge, huge challenge. And when I say public spaces, I mean the transportation, whether it's buses, metros, trains, whatever way we are looking at. There has to be a complete overhaul, and there has to be a zero tolerance. I always remember my mom used to tell me the story that as a young girl, when she was teased, there was another woman walking on the street, and she comes from a small town in Rajasthan, and the woman actually stood up and said, "How dare you?" She pushed that man. In Delhi, do you think somebody will do that? You'll get stabbed for doing it. So everyone needs to really pitch in. It's not a women's problem. It's not my problem alone. It's not her problem alone. If one half of our population cannot go about giving their best for the society, for the nation, then it's a huge problem for the nation.
Yeah, you've touched on a very sensitive issue, and we'll come back after a break to really look at how we can address the issue of not just providing women safety and security, but how to educate the larger mass of India to respect the space that women occupy. But that after a break. Welcome back. We continue to have our two guests with us, and I go back to you, Ms. Dastidar. Now, you brought up this issue about if the company wants you badly enough, the company will cater for your essential requirements. But some research has shown us that even when companies do provide transportation to women, women are not necessarily open to using company transportation because either it's not cheap enough or it happens at hours which are not suitable to them, particularly those who work at the BPO sector, or because they feel that they have other modes of transport. So how do you do this balancing act on, I'm asking on behalf of a CEO, that see, I want to provide more, but how do I make sure that you have door-to-door connectivity, right, and you come to work feeling safe, comfortable, you work in a comfortable environment, go back, and if a facility is provided, then you may as well make use of it and not then start counting your pennies.
I think one glove does not fit all. That's the one thing that we need to understand. We take a very band-aid solution for everything, and we say, okay, we'll give you this card, this will take you from home to your office and you'll be safe. And we'll say, okay, that we've done. But have we asked those women that why are they not being able to use it? Will you tell us what can we do differently? I mean, have we asked these women who work for us? Do we want to know what are their problems? Is it because of the timing issue? Is it because they think it's an expensive affair, or they want to save on that little amount of money that they get as extra transport allowance? I mean, I have seen all of that. And it's only when I come back to my fundamental point that let women decide what they'd like to do. It's time to give them a place at the table and say, how would you like this? Because we've always just given them solutions which does not work for them.
Right, so it's important to use that as an essential indicator of good management, that are you speaking to your women employees and addressing, and that's a message I think should go out to the CEOs. But I come to a legal dimension, and that is, even if a woman was to report harassment, many of them apparently don't report because of the social stigma attached to it. Many of them don't report because they feel it'll just complicate things further. You as a lawyer, what is your response to it? How can you do the balancing act by getting them to inform you and getting action taken on it without exposing them unnecessarily?
Well, the problem is that the systems are all in place, the processes are all in place. After the Vishakha guidelines, it's mandatory, and the new law, it's mandatory for every organization to have internal complaints committee, gender sensitization committees.
Right.
They are required to be headed by a woman. They should have at least one half of the members should be women. So a lot of things have been put in place in perspective. But when we speak about patriarchy, it's not just men who form that patriarchy. The problem that I've seen in my experience in some of these committees representing women and as part of the committee is the older women. See, the problem, vulnerability is more when you are younger and newer in the system. As you get ingrained in the system, the problem is some of us women become part of that patriarchy. Then we don't want to, see the vulnerability of this new girl and new entrant in the profession and help her out. So women need to stand up for women. It's not a one girl, one person issue at all. It has to be looked at as a comprehensive issue, and we have to stop victimizing the victim. Victim is victim. I mean, even in rape cases, Supreme Court had to use this expression that sometimes trial is like adding insult to injury. Exactly same thing happens. When you come up with a complaint, then exactly the same thing happens. But the solution is only if we stop accepting it. The only solution is we have to stop accepting it. The longer we continue to accept nonsense, the longer nonsense will be served to us.
But would I be going a step too far to suggest that to stop accepting it, we have to start educating our people from the very earliest stages and not when they become adults and are the likely crime doers?
You're right, sir. So there are some long-term things, and the long-term things have to start from your sons and daughters at home. But there are a lot of short-term things. One example was the Me Too campaign. It really took the stigma and the victimization out of the victim. And when you feel that, oh, there are other women who are facing the same issues that you are facing, then it becomes everybody's story. And then it becomes such a huge story, it becomes a tsunami. And I think more than other kinds of drives, but these kind of campaigns do help a lot.
Okay, lots of points there. But going back to something that you had spoken about, and you had talked about one glove doesn't fit all. Now, some of the largest employers of women workforce are people in the hospitality sector, the tourism sector, the BPOs and others. Now, all of them have different requirements. So, yes, on one side we can say that their management knows what their requirements are and needs to address that. But on the other side, it is also, could we look at some broad guidelines from the government which will generally apply across the industrial space where women are all employed? And if they are broad guidelines that can come into play, what should they?
I think first we need to understand why there's been such a drop in the amount of labor force, women labor force that is dropping from the workforce. If you look at our numbers, I was just looking at the numbers, I think in 1990 we were 34% working women.
And now it's 25.3%.
Exactly. I mean, look at that drop. This is a question that the government needs to answer. Why is such a huge chunk of women labor force dropping out of the workforce? That's one. Secondly, yes, there are traditional roles again, which women apply to hospitality sector and pharma, medicine, medical care, all of that. But what about telecom? These are the highest companies who look at hiring young adults from the workforce. Why are they not hiring women? And are they less skilled? I mean, these are questions that the government should be asking. These are the questions that the government needs to ask. Are they any less skilled? We have 100% women enrollment into elementary education. What happens? Do they then enter the undergrad education system? If they are undergrad, what is the percentage that is converting from 100% elementary to a workforce there? So I think the government needs to look at this gap that is there. But most importantly, it needs to address the confidence gap in women. What is this confidence gap that I'm talking about? That I look at a ad for a job interview and I say, okay, I only meet 60% of the criteria, I will not apply. The same thing, a man will look at it and will also just qualify 60%, he will go ahead and apply. What is this confidence gap we are talking about?
Oh, very, very, very good point. But I mean, this calls for a separate debate altogether, because issues like heritage, history, societal pressures, your parents not thinking it's worth your while to carry on with a career, but more important to get married, all those things do come into play. And at the end of the day, I mean, I'm reminded of the words of a writer to say the problem with India is that it's always constantly battling between the archaism of the past and the promise of the future, and that is something. But ma'am, last question to you: what do you think should be the kind of public-private partnerships that you would suggest briefly as a model for enhancing government and the private industries' efforts to enhance the role of women at work?
So she spoke about the corporate model, but there is a large women workspace in areas where they are self-employed or professional or entrepreneurs. I'm in a profession where you are self-employed, and it's a male bastion. It has always been a male bastion. So there are a whole lot of problems that it is all sector separated. I want to give you 2 examples of my cases. Doctor in the Delhi Health Services, because she's a temporary doctor, she will not be given the full maternity benefit. Now that hurts, because today's women want to go out and break the male bastions. Not really break, but they want to make their presence felt. But they don't want to give up the traditional roles, not all of them. Talk about the forces, the defense forces. We still have the permanent commission matter still pending in the forces. So stop symbolism. Women are good enough to carry on the roles today, and you take them. Don't dilute the standards for them. For whatever sector you're looking at, don't dilute the sectors, but don't do symbolism. If she's good enough for short service commission, she's good enough for permanent commission.
Well, lots of important issues have been raised, and quite clearly this is not the last word on the subject. But thank you very much for being with us on the show, and we have quite importantly, most importantly, brought out the fact that women are ready for the bigger challenge. Society has to give them greater opportunities, and the job of the government and the corporate sector is to facilitate that. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, goodbye.